Welcome. I'm Hernan Murdoch. In this episode, we're going to talk about fieldwork techniques. We're going to take a look at the reliability of evidence, take also a look at a very authoritative organization and their guidance on evidence, and look at some factors that influence the strength of the evidence we collect. To help us better understand fieldwork elements and the collection and use of evidence, Kathleen Crawford is going to help us dig in a little bit deeper into this topic and take a look at some of these factors that we need to keep in mind. Welcome, Kathleen.
Hi, Hernan.
So, as we're looking at evidence, there are different types of evidence. So, can you elaborate on those types and help us appreciate what we need to be on the lookout for?
Absolutely. Well, today we're going to talk about 9 different types of evidence, and we'll discuss them each in turn, and then talk about how their relative strength should be assessed by auditors in terms of deciding which techniques to use. So let's look at the graphic. The first 3 that are mentioned on this graphic are observation, inquiry, and analysis. These are at the bottom of the scale in terms of reliability. So observation is exactly what it sounds like. We watch things happen. We watch people do the work that they do. And we can do this live in person. We can do this live through a video channel, or we could also watch recordings that are available for us to look at after the fact. Observation should not be presumed to be inconsequential, though, because watching something happen, or even the next one, inquiry, talking to people, is a great springboard to a better understanding of the areas, processes, and systems that we're looking at.
Well, when we're looking at observation, Kathleen, I recall several reviews that I did where specifically around construction projects and looking at adherence with following safety standards and using the safety equipment they're supposed to wear, whether it's helmets and steel toe boots and safety belts and reflective vests and so on. And I recall several instances taking a look at those dynamics off to the side and noticing that when they were describing the process that they followed, that they were very diligent in very detailed in what they were supposed to do. But when you do this observation, sometimes you notice that there's some differences or discrepancies in the practice or inconsistencies in the practice. So just to highlight the importance of some of these procedures to our audience, be on the lookout for these dynamics as well. Don't just go by what they tell you. Sometimes observation becomes a very important procedure to verify that what they're telling you is in fact what they're doing. So be on the lookout for those kind of dynamics as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if we are observing live, we have to be mindful that we have an effect on the people we are observing. Some
Right.
people will engage in perfect performance because they know they're being watched, as you were alluding to, or possibly alluding to. And then sometimes people are made very nervous by being watched not because there's anything wrong, but because they're not accustomed to it and they might forget some steps. And so we want to be
Yes.
mindful of that. Yes.
Exactly. Exactly.
So continuing on, we also have inquiry. This is going to be very important. All of our communication skills are quite important. How do we handle those meetings, those conversations? How do we acquire information that is confirming of what we've read, for example, or we compare different perspectives through different meetings and interviews? This is also an important technique. Then we move on to analysis, studying data closely by examination, verification, filtering. So we use a variety of techniques to help us see what is similar or dissimilar in terms of to records or to documents or all manner of things that we are trying to assess for completeness and accuracy and to verify that accuracy through analysis.
Hmm. Okay.
Then on the next graphic, we have 3 more: confirmation, scanning, inspection of documents. These 3 become stronger in terms of reliability. Confirmation can be written information that we get from a third party, and this helps us determine whether or not something is true, whether it's complete, whether it's accurate, especially in terms of conditions, balances, assets. And confirmations come in 2 flavors, both negative and positive. A negative confirmation is one where we send out a request for information, but we tell the respondent that they don't have to answer us if everything is okay. Positive confirmations are where we ask for them to respond to us whether there's a problem or not. We just want to hear back from them, and we want them to positively affirm that the information is as we perceive it to be.
So of those two procedures, then I would imagine the positive one is far superior from the perspective of not having to assume, which is what you do with a negative confirmation.
Yes,
If you don't receive it back, you're assuming that everything is in order, but that may not be the case. It may be that they did not receive it, that they haven't gotten around to doing it, it got lost in transit somehow. So there's an assumption implied in not hearing back. But the positive confirmation, you're asking them to respond either way.
exactly.
That way you have a more positive, as the name implies, piece of information related to the assets, which it could be on bank balances. I've seen it with inventory, the condition or safety, location of assets, and various things like those. So definitely something that is widely used and something to keep in mind as well. Thank you.
Definitely. Further on the graphic, we have scanning. So scanning should be thought of as a cursory review. So this is now the auditor himself or herself looking through information, culling through it to see what might be questionable, improper, or somehow significant. This one should be seen as not unintentional, but certainly not a deep dive. Scanning is just an overview, a quick comparison of information. And then we get a little bit more intense about it, inspecting documents. Now we're looking at records and documents in a more deliberative fashion, being aware of where document reliability might be a concern. Are we satisfied that the information is true and accurate and complete on its face? So inspection gets more intense, and now that reliability of evidence increases as a consequence.
So this can also apply to data. So look at scanning versus inspecting as well. So I remember many instances where we're doing data analytics for a review, and one of the first things you do is just take a high-level view of the data, maybe sort it, maximum, minimum, or vice versa, and just looking for those negative values that should not be there. Everything should be positive. So why do we have negative? We have alpha when they should be numeric. They should be within certain range of values. Various things like those that can just give you a high-level understanding or appreciation as to whether or not what you have is data that meets certain parameters, and then you can then do a deeper dive in it. So that's definitely an important procedure there as well. So yeah, what else? What are some of the other things that we need to keep in mind?
Well, with regard to the scanning versus the more cursory review, I tell newer auditors not to jump into reading things right away. If you get a document, especially if you're getting a document via delivery electronically, change the orientation of the document, see how things line up before you start to read. Get an impression of how things look, and that can be a quick and dirty review that helps you determine whether or not the things line up properly. So does it tell you anything in terms of the care that is taken as these documents are prepared, for example?
Good tip. Good tip. Thank you. Yeah, I like it.
Okay.
What else? What are the other procedures we need to be on the
So we
lookout
have
for
three
as
more.
to reviews?
We have three more, and the graphic shows us that they are recalculation, inspection of tangible assets, and reperformance. So these three are the highest in terms of involvement, I would say. Recalculation means that we ourselves independently do the math ourselves. And so this can be done through technology or manually if we still need to do it that way. But by proving that the information on the document or in the data is as it is presented, we can really safely rely on this information and know that it is true, it is complete, it is accurate. And reperformance is similar in that we're doing this work ourselves, but the procedures might have to do more with seeing that controls were operating as intended, as opposed to whether or not something is mathematically correct. And wedged in between is inspection of tangible assets. We ourselves physically examine things, inspect them, count them. We might really touch them, feel them, to determine the condition and the quality, and certainly to verify that they exist as they're presented and that they are present in the numbers that we expect. So these three are the highest level of fieldwork techniques in terms of reliability.
And for some of the procedures where this will apply, recalculating, for example, our reserve for uncollectible balances or for shrinkage and inventory or something like that. So journal entries, accruals. I recall many instances where we recalculated some of those figures just to make sure they were mathematically correct, like you stated. So
Yeah,
very good. Yes.
absolutely. So let's
So
take a
as
look
far
at
as
that range, though, the range
mhm,
of reliability. So as I had talked about them individually, I alluded to this. Now we can see it in black and white, so to speak. Inquiry and observation are the lowest in terms of reliability, but as we were talking about, they're great springboards to the other techniques. It makes a difference to the auditor to be able to see for himself or herself whether or not things are showing up as expected. So we've done a lot of planning and we're trying to get a handle on how things work. So watching and talking to people, just having conversations can be very, very helpful in this regard. And then the other more intense types of fieldwork techniques we see in the middle and at the top. So the range that I talked about is right here on this graphic.
great. It's a good way to see it. So it helps us better gauge what reliability we're looking for. And whenever possible, try to go to the highest level of evidence, stronger evidence, better, more authoritative as relates to our work. So very important and very helpful to organize it that way as well. So as relates to the PCAOB, which is a very authoritative organization providing guidance specifically or primarily around Sarbanes-Oxley reviews, but widely viewed as setting best practices for the profession, what do they say about evidence?
Well, what the PCAOB came out with is something known as AS 1105.08, very, very official. It's the accounting statement 1105, subpart 08. And reliability of audit evidence depends on its nature and source and even how it's obtained. So, what they talk about here are four factors: evidence obtained from a knowledgeable source independent of the area being audited is more reliable. So let's say, Hernan, that you're the keeper of record of something that I'm interested in, but I'm auditing you. If I can find a confirming record from another source that is not you, and they compare or they true up with each other, then I'm feeling pretty confident that this evidence is reliable. Auditors obtaining information directly is seen as more reliable as well than evidence obtained indirectly. And I can tell you from my own personal experience that this has proven to be important in more than one case in my career as well. That what I pulled myself, as opposed to what was provided to me, sometimes don't look exactly the same. And so making sure, and I see you're smiling, so you know whereof I speak.
I've been
Sometimes
there.
sometimes people like to pretty it up, and not because they're trying to hide something. I think often they're trying to make things easier, but that can actually make things worse. We're trying to see things as they are.
Right.
And then original documentation is better than photocopies. And this is harder for us to get at. So even though PCAOB mentions it, I think we can all recognize that so much information now is scanned or is created within technology now. And so there's not an original in the traditional sense of the word. And then finally, if we're looking at evidence obtained from an area processor system, we can feel that it is more reliable when the controls have been assessed to be effective. So if an area has already been through an audit and has strong internal controls, then we can feel even more confident that their information is reliable. So these
Great.
four things are what PCAOB has put forward. And as you alluded to, I agree that we don't have to be a publicly traded U.S. company to rely on their guidance. They are very authoritative in that sphere. But in my nonprofit work, I have paid a lot of attention to any time that PCAOB made a determination of something such as audit evidence reliability.
Exactly, right. Very good practice there indeed. So, as relates to the factors that influence evidence and how we're supposed to handle it, what are some of the guidelines we should keep in mind as well?
Well, to cap this off, I think we should take a look at this graphic. Some general evidence factors. So, general things that auditors should be mindful of are the source, the verifiability, the definition of procedures used. So, if we understand that they're using some kind of sampling method and a specific sampling method. And then as someone who reviews auditors' work, I'm also interested in their relative knowledge or competence. So where does the evidence come from? We need to think about this in terms of independence and objectivity. Is it verifiable? If I had to mark any one of these as the most important, in my opinion, it's verifiability. Can we produce and reproduce this information and know that it is accurate on its face? And finally, the procedures that we use. Are we using strong procedures and not just always relying on, say, inquiry and observation, but taking that extra step or those deeper steps in some of the other techniques that we spoke about?
Yes, as we're thinking about evidence in general, I guess it's always important to remind ourselves why we do it and what we're aspiring for. So part of that is making sure we can answer the question conclusively related to the risks and the controls we're reviewing, but also that is defensible. So when we reach a result and a conclusion, that anyone who questions it, we can go back and show them with evidence, the stronger the better, show them with evidence how we came to those results and conclusions so they can be defended as well. So if we keep those things in mind, I think we'll go a long way towards making sure that our reviews are done with high quality and that will also pass any tests that may come along the way in the future as well. So thank you very much, because this was very helpful in helping us understand different procedures that we can perform, how we collect the evidence, the different ways we can do it, also in terms of what are some of the factors that influence the quality and the strength of the evidence. So thank you very much. I appreciate it, Kathleen.
My pleasure, Hernan.
If you like this series, subscribe to the ACI Learning YouTube channel to enjoy more audit-related content.